From that place, as people were converted, the gospel began to be preached in the region of Judea. And then in the book of Acts, we have the record that Philip went down to Samaria and he began to preach the gospel to those half-breeds in Samaria. And they began to believe the gospel and be brought into the kingdom and be made part of God's temple here on the earth. And then ultimately, largely through the work and efforts of the Apostle Paul, the gospel began to go out to all of the nations of the earth. An interesting passage. In Acts chapter 13, verse 47, Paul and Barnabas, I believe it was in a Jewish synagogue in Antioch of Pisidia. And they've preached the gospel to the Jews there, and the Jews have rejected the gospel of Jesus Christ. And Paul looks at them and says, we're going to carry this gospel to the Gentile nations. And look at what he says. For so the Lord has commanded us, saying, I have made you a light for the Gentiles, that you may bring salvation to the ends of the earth. Now you notice, I have made you a light for the Gentiles is in quotations there, right? That you might bring salvation to the ends of the earth. That's in quotations. That means he's quoting someone, right? Possibly a New Testament passage, right? No. He is actually quoting an Old Testament passage. Look what he does. He reaches back into the book of Isaiah. When Isaiah is prophesying of the Messianic kingdom in which true Israel will rule and reign as priest kings, and he's prophesying and he says, and this is so awesome because it so inextricably links the church and Christ together. When you're reading the passage, you can't tell if it's the people of God Isaiah is talking about or Christ himself. You can't tell reading the passage when you read it in its full context. But look at what Isaiah says. Indeed, he says, it is too small a thing that you should be my servant, to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to restore the preserved ones of Israel. There's your remnant of Israel. I will also give you as a light to the Gentiles, that you should be my salvations to the end of the earth. Paul is quoting Isaiah when he makes this statement to the Jews in the book of Acts. He's quoting Isaiah. And as you look at the passage of Isaiah, remember, Paul said, we receive this command from the Lord. But as you read that particular passage from Isaiah, it's as if he's speaking of Christ himself. Which is it? Both. We are so inextricably tied to Christ as our chief cornerstone and our head and our shepherd. There's almost no distinction in some of these passages. You're going to be a light to the Gentiles, that you should be my salvation to the ends of the earth. There's your expansion. All the way back in Isaiah chapter 49. Isn't that awesome? See, God's program has been fixed from the beginning. He's not been figuring this thing out as it unfolds and moving from plan A to B to C to D, etc. He's known what he's doing from the beginning. You shall be my salvation to the ends of the earth. To the ends of the earth. Do you realize that according to Southern Baptist Convention research and statistics, there are some 2,200 people groups and language groups on the face of this earth that have not yet heard the gospel of Jesus Christ? What did Isaiah mean when he said that God said, you're going to be a light to the Gentiles and you're going to be my means of salvation to the ends of the earth? He meant to the ends of the earth without any exceptions. Without any exceptions. And you see this concept all through these prophecies in the Old Testament. The book of Habakkuk. Habakkuk is prophesying about this expanding end-time temple. And he makes this statement with which most of all of you should be very familiar. He says, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Now there's your missional statement. And it's not surprising at all that historically that has been the missional statement of Bible-believing missionaries of Calvinistic persuasion for centuries. The knowledge of the glory of the Lord is going to fill the earth as the waters cover the sea. You know, every one of those people groups, Justin, are going to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ, because the promise is, I'm going to redeem for myself some of every people, every kindred, every nation, every tribe, every tongue, and they will serve me. The gospel of salvation is going to be carried to the ends of the earth until it culminates in something. Until it culminates in exactly what John saw in his vision on the Isle of Patmos. I want you to pay close attention to what John says here. He says, I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. Now this is a brand new heaven and a brand new earth, fully and completely recreated heavens and earth. Now, if you look at this, and you know that John is about to describe what he is seeing here, you might expect a description wherein he would begin to describe the beauty of the ethereal heavens of this new creation, or the glories of the flora and fauna of this new created earth. Would you not? But that's not what he describes. Look at what he describes. He says, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. And then in his next statement, he begins to describe it. And it was the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven as a bride.